Good day to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to today's tropical weather outlook for July 24th, 2026. Today, we're going to talk about El Nino. I'm going to update you on current conditions in the Pacific. Of course, on the latest on our strengthening El Nino, which is at record strength right now already, and it's going to continue to strengthen very likely here, probably in a significant way in the coming weeks. And it may lead to a significant increase in tropical activity all throughout the Pacific, as we've already been seeing for the past few weeks. But it is very likely going to kick into overdrive, especially in these coming 2 to 3 weeks. So I'm going to show you everything, go over the latest on ENSO, go over the latest on the tropics. We have a lot to go over today, so let's get started. First off, by taking a look at the sea surface temperature anomaly map on a global scale from the NOAA Coral Reef Watch website. I love using this website for sea surface temperature anomalies, and it is a very, very sleek map here. It shows you the entire globe right now, sea surface temperature anomaly-wise, and you can see our El Nino sticks out like a sore thumb here. Very, very warm sea surface temperature anomalies along the equatorial Pacific, and in terms of this, being a classic El Nino, well, it really can't get any more classic than this. Very warm sea surface temperature anomalies concentrated along the equatorial Pacific, and these values are continuing to shatter records here as our record-setting El Nino really is underway at this point. We have widespread anomalies here, pretty much stretching all the way from the Central Pacific to the the South American coastline of sea surface temperature anomalies as much as 2 degrees Celsius, and you're even starting to see a lot more of these 3 degrees Celsius shadings fill in along the Central Pacific, stretching all the way up to the Central Pacific now. And we also have these 4 degrees Celsius and even places as warm as 5 degrees Celsius above normal shading in here in the Eastern Pacific. And, it's easy and it's very simple to say we have 4 or 5 degrees Celsius anomalies, but when you think about the magnitude of just how insane that is, that's, incredible amounts of extra heat in the ocean, which is helping drive this very, very strong El Nino. And taking a look at the latest Nino 3.4 sea surface temperature anomalies, you can see the latest value. We are now at 2.3 degrees Celsius above normal with the raw sea surface temperature anomaly values here. So we are well exceeding above super El Nino intensity now. In fact, we're probably not far from pushing up to 2.5. And that would really be getting into, top tier record-breaking El Nino territory. And this is all quite incredible that we are seeing this occur since it is still only late July. And again, this really kind of captures the magnitude of just how widespread these very, very warm values here are along the equatorial Pacific. And again, we still have even more warmth here in the Eastern Pacific, which is probably going to push westward here in the coming weeks and months, and probably a lot of that alone will come within just the matter of a few weeks here. But even with the relative Nino index, the Nino 3.4, that itself is up to 1.9 degrees Celsius above normal. And we are basically nearly knocking the door of reaching super El Nino intensity on the relative Nino index as well. And again, we are still not even in August, and this is significant because, the sea surface temperature anomalies here on the raw map are well above super El Nino threshold. Again, we're at 2.3, probably about to reach 2.4 here in terms of the sea surface temperature anomalies, but the index that matters more is the relative Nino index, since that, accounts for any extra background warming that might be affecting the, sea surface temperature anomaly maps, which is the whole reason why we have the relative Nino index. Bottom line, what I'm trying to tell you is this is all incredible. The fact that we have as warm sea surface temperature anomalies that we do right now, and it just continues to go up as the days go by here. It's been going up ever since early May, and once again, it is probably only going to continue to go up over the next few weeks, and probably at least the next week or so now. But probably by the time we enter the month of July here, I wouldn't be surprised if we hit 2 degrees Celsius on this map here, and finally, begin to catch up to the raw sea surface temperature anomaly map. But why is this all incredible? Why am I saying record breaking? Why am I, saying stuff like that? And I know there will probably be a bunch of other people online and, out there who will say that, oh, I'm just saying words like record breaking to sensationalize. And I understand where that sentiment comes from, but I'm just showing you the data here. I'm just showing you the statistics and the data that we have right now. And here's the look at the daily sea surface temperature in the Nino 3.4. And this is a graph comparing this year to, as you can see here, quite a list full of years in the past. I think this goes all the way back to 1982 or something like that. Let's see, does that go that far back? Yes, we actually go back to 1981 here. So this is a plot of all of the years of the sea surface temperature in the Nino 3.4 with all the daily values here. And again, this goes back like over 30 years. And this year, 2026, the latest daily sea surface temperature reading is at 29.27 degrees Celsius. Climatology-wise, in terms of the anomalies above or below normal, we are at, again, above 2 degrees Celsius above normal. So at super El Nino threshold today on the daily sea surface temperature map, and that is well ahead of every other year that we have of sea surface temperature plots in the Nino 3.4 going back to 1981. So we are well exceeding every other year, including years like 1997. By the time we got to July 23rd, or let's maybe go to July 25th here. I don't want to go back that way, but you could see we were at 28.72. The anomaly was 1.6 or 1.7 degrees Celsius above normal. And 1997 was a near record strong El Nino year. Another year like 2015 too which was the most recent super El Nino. Even that year, we were only at 1.2 or 1.3 degrees Celsius above normal around this time, and yet this year we are already at 2 degrees Celsius above normal. So we are far above and eclipsing record-breaking El Nino years like 2015 and 1997, and that just goes to show the scope of how intense and strong our current El Nino already is. Taking a look at the SOI dashboard now, this is a measurement of how El Nino conditions are responding in the atmosphere, and perfectly in line with the fact that we have a very strong El Nino now. The latest 30-day average of the SOI is at negative 25 points. Not every single day that you see the SOI that low on the average. Now, sometimes we can get, these extremely low SOI averages, in daily, plots and daily values, but quite incredible that right now we are at negative 25 on the latest 30-day average. And the 90-day average, too, is sitting at negative 20. And basically what this means is that the atmosphere right now is very strongly responding like El Nino, since negative SOI means the pressure patterns in the Pacific are more favorable for an El Nino. So this lines up perfectly with the very, very warm sea surface temperatures right now that we have. And of course, this is only going to help strengthen our El Nino even further in the coming weeks as the atmosphere is continuing to couple more and more with what is shaping up to be, once again, a near record strong El Nino. And probably the most perfect representation right now of that is taking a look at the latest zonal wind anomaly plots in the Western Pacific. And all of these oranges and reds and even browns here and even white colors that you see here represent very, very strong westerly wind bursts throughout the Pacific, which is what helps strengthen El Nino, and we've been going at it with these very strong westerly wind bursts pretty much ever since the end of June. And now we are here a month later at the end of July. And now from now till late July into early August, you can see the European ensemble forecast going out from now till early August here. These westerly wind anomalies are only going to continue right along through the heart of the equatorial Pacific. And of course, this is only going to help warm the sea surface temperature anomalies even further and keep us on that gravy train of more warmth building in the Pacific. And overall, we should absolutely expect El Nino to continue to strengthen here over the next few weeks. But most importantly, we are probably especially going to see El Nino continue to strengthen over the next few days alone here. We're probably going to see a huge spike once again in the sea surface temperature anomaly plots because, look at the values that we're seeing right now in the westerly wind bursts here in just a matter of the next few days. We have off the scale, kind of merged chart and scale into one word there. Sorry for that, but off the scale, off the chart, record. I'd assume some of these values here are probably record, but again, it just goes to show how strong of an El Nino that is building and how well the atmosphere is responding to that. And these sea surface temperature anomalies are happening on top of a incredibly warm pool of sea surface temperature anomalies below the surface. And this is probably one of the main drivers as to why we have such incredible anomalies appearing on the surface here. And you bet that these westerly wind anomalies here are only going to continue to help fuel this incredible subsurface warmth to continue to build and eventually make its way to the surface as well. Some of these values here below the surface, we're seeing them as high as 6, 7, even 8 degrees Celsius above normal. Absolute monstrous, warmth here building in the subsurface of the Pacific. And again, this is just going to help continue to feed the loop of westerly winds, bring to the surface lots of warmth, which is in the equatorial Pacific, which is only going to help strengthen the El Nino and in turn help strengthen the atmosphere response as El Nino continues to grow. So quite an incredible pattern setting up. And again, going back to records and comparing this year to past years, including, some of our, most intense El Nino years, Paul Rundy, another very, knowledgeable guy on climatology and things when it comes to El Nino and things of that nature. And I really do like to follow him because he says quite a bit of interesting things. He says that part of the present advantage is the ongoing westerly wind burst time later than the corresponding one in 1997. And he says, which was late May, early June. And this year's summer wind event was longer and ultimately stronger. And what he's basically pointing out is that's helping contribute to the fact that the subsurface warmth here in the equatorial Pacific definitely well ahead of the amount of warmth that we had in the subsurface for the 1997 Super El Nino event. So basically that means that this year we are definitely ahead of 1997, and you can only assume that more than likely here all of this subsurface warmth that we have built in the Pacific is probably going to lead to another, probably an El Nino that is stronger than 1997. And what I think he's especially mentioning here as well is the fact that all of this warmth has, been able to accumulate because of the fact that this year we kind of saw the warmth build a little bit later on and a little bit slower than 1997 is. Basically, what this means is Super El Nino is only continuing to strengthen, and we are probably going to blow well past some of the record-setting El Nino events of the past year. And the MJO as well, something that also reflects how things are going atmospherically. The MJO over the next 2 weeks here, according to the European. Expected to hang out around the Pacific. So pretty much what that means is rising motion will be focused in the Pacific. That's only going to lead to more westerly wind bursts. And probably, as well, as I'll talk about here in just a second, that's also going to help fuel lots of tropical cyclone activity in the Pacific, in all basins of the Pacific as well. But in typical El Nino fashion, once again, another sign that we are definitely in a very strong El Nino. Again, the MJO is going to be very concentrated here in the Pacific for the next few weeks. Going into phase 8, we're one phase 8 right now, then going back into null phase, and then moving right back out into the phase 6 and 7, which is the Pacific phase. So the fact that the MJO is centered and concentrated in the Pacific, yet another sign of a very, very strong El Nino currently building. And take this out not just through the next 7 to 10 days here, but maybe you could go all the way out to the middle to end of August, as Ben Knoll is doing here. He mentions that El Nino is expected to dominate through August with a sprawling standing wave of rising air anchored over the exceptionally warm waters of the tropical Pacific. And I went over this tweet yesterday, but I guess this kind of gives more context today. The MJO here, represented by all of the rising motion that you see in this graph, and let me actually bring it on full screen here. All the rising motion here in the Pacific, absolutely a reflection of El Nino, and a very strong El Nino at that. And it's only expected to continue to persist. In fact, probably even grow. And you can see it actually kind of becomes more concentrated here as the weeks go by and as we head into early August. And again, this is only going to continue to help fuel El Nino to strengthen even further. And this line, too, especially will be very interesting and very important. This is expected to fuel several hurricanes and typhoons in the coming weeks. And with that being said, a reflection, probably the biggest reflection of all of the, atmospheric response that we're seeing right now because of this very strong El Nino. Lots of activity here bubbling in tropics-wise in the Pacific. And this is only going to continue to ramp up over the next few weeks. But in the Pacific right now, we have 3 active tropical systems, and Invest here as well. And you could also see the remnants of Bertha now over Texas. And yes, Bertha has officially degenerated and is no longer a tropical system, so not going to really worry about this system anymore. But again, lots of activity here already in the Pacific, and as I'll show you in a little bit, it's only going to ramp up even further from here. But we have Hurricane Fausto right now, and another tropical depression in the eastern Pacific. I'm going to focus on, these 2 storms in a little bit, but also activity as well up and coming in the western Pacific. We have Tropical Storm Noel, and this is going to head towards China and potentially rapidly strengthen and, kind of be one of those, rapidly intensifying storms that we have sometimes in the western Atlantic, like one of those homegrown storms in the Gulf, that rapidly intensify in a matter of 2 to 3 days before landfall. Looks like Tropical Storm Noel might do that and may become a major strength typhoon before it makes landfall here in China. And let's really quickly show you that here. Well, first of all, you could see the satellite shot of Noel. Definitely an organized looking system right now. Sea surface temperature wise, in its path ahead here, leading up to China, very warm sea surface temperatures, as much as 30, 31 degrees Celsius above, not above normal, 30 degrees Celsius above normal, that would be insane, but 30 degrees Celsius, sea surface temperature is more than enough for rapid intensification. And then here's the official forecast here from the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, strengthening to 85 knots, which is 100 miles per hour, as it, heads towards China here within probably the next, day to 2 days, and it's probably going to rapidly intensify. Would not be shocked if we probably get something stronger than 85 knots, maybe again as strong as probably even a major strength typhoon. So already looking at quite a bit, here to track in the Western Pacific, and then there's another invest on top of that as well. and probably, as I'll show you with the ensembles in a little bit, very likely a very strong storm. You know, it, probably looking at yet again another one of those monster long track typhoons here and coming up in the Western Pacific as well in the next week or so. I'll show you that in a little bit. But once again, focusing back onto the Eastern Pacific, since we do have, official products mainly for the Eastern Pacific, since, we have the National Hurricane Center after all. Here's the latest on what is happening in the Pacific right now as things continue to heat up here. We have Hurricane Fausto, 105 miles per hour, so Category 2 now. This is trying to intensify, and maybe it might intensify a little bit more here in the coming days before it'll eventually weaken as there is cooler water ahead of it, but still a decent hurricane right now. Winds at 100, again, Category 2, and moving on off to the west-northwest here. And then Tropical Depression 7E, which formed today, and it's looking very likely that 7E is going to be our first major hurricane here of the Eastern Pacific in the coming weeks. So one major hurricane likely going to spawn out of the Eastern Pacific here alone, and then we have probably a few more coming in the Western Pacific. So again, lots of activity to track here in the Pacific. And then we have another area here in the Central Pacific, which is up to a 70% chance of development. And I think this area here might help contribute to what will very likely be a very strong and long track typhoon here in the Western Pacific. And speaking of that now, looking at the ensembles here, I'll show you what the ensembles look like for the Western Pacific in just a little bit, but you can see lots of activity here expected in the Eastern Pacific. Obviously, we have Hurricane Fausto, which is going to continue to move on off to the west-northwest. And eventually down the line here, that might be, a threat for Hawaii, as the ensembles here, pretty much keep this on west-northwesterly track. Eventually, you're going to reach Hawaii with that. And, you do notice that a lot of the ensembles here weaken by then, so more than likely we're not talking about a strong storm that'll approach Hawaii, but still, definitely a signal nonetheless that we're going to have to keep an eye out here in the coming days. And then the signal for Tropical Depression 7E, which formed today, quite very strong, a lot of ensembles indicating a major hurricane, which is what the official what the official track from the National Hurricane Center has, although I'll show you that in a second. But Hurricane Fausto here from the National Hurricane Center, again, expected to move on to a west-northwesterly path over the next few days, and most of Hawaii now is in the cone of uncertainty once we get towards the 5-day time frame. Although weakening over time is expected, as again, it's probably going to move into cooler waters over the next few days. But as you know the drill. If you're in the cone of uncertainty here, you are at risk of potentially getting a track directly over your area. So those in Hawaii should absolutely be monitoring Fausto here very closely over the next several days, as we might be talking about a tropical threat for them. And then, of course, we have Tropical Depression 7E, expected to strengthen pretty rapidly here over the next few days, and by early next week, the National Hurricane Center is expecting a major hurricane here in the Eastern Pacific, likely once again to be the first major hurricane of the Eastern Pacific season. And this could also potentially become a pretty strong storm, especially if it's able to really start, intensifying very soon. But major hurricane likely on the way for them. For those tracking in the Eastern Pacific, any threats to land, to Mexico directly, are not looking very likely at this time. But of course, we are going to be tracking a major hurricane here, so definitely we'll want to keep an eye out on that. And then the Western Pacific, on the other hand, as I said before, explosion of activity very likely. You can see lots of ensemble members here, especially in the eastern portion of the basin, likely showing a strong, monster long-track typhoon, or I think that'll probably be the outcome given what we typically see with these type of signals here, especially in a year like this year, where the Western Pacific is very favorable, but in the very least, we're probably going to get another very intense long-track typhoon here which will absolutely help, rack up the ACE score in the Western Pacific. And then we have the signal associated with null, and you could definitely see that quite a few ensembles show some pretty rapid strengthening in just the next few days here before it approaches China. And then you just have a lot of other messy ensemble members here. And I saw a tweet a few days ago, somebody saying that this ensemble plot here from the European looks about as what you would expect for a strong El Nino in late July. Messy. I certainly agree with them, because this is definitely a signal of lots of activity to come here. And again, it all dates back to El Nino and the fact that we're going to have very, very strong westerly winds here, which is going to help fuel El Nino to strengthen even further. And as a result, that'll also help fuel tropical cyclone activity to only uptick even more. And it just helps, it's a feedback loop that feeds itself. The more activity you have here, tropical activity-wise, that actually helps fuel more westerly winds in the Pacific, and El Nino and tropical activity in the Pacific, two things that are really going to take off here in the next few weeks. And then meanwhile, finally, in the Atlantic, on the other hand, just really quickly running out the model here for throughout the next week. Nothing much expected. Definitely nothing much expected, especially in the eastern tropical Atlantic. Nothing coming out of the MDR, and absolutely nothing at all through the Caribbean. Sheer and dry air is going to be absolutely ripping through the deep tropics here in the Atlantic. Might get some activity, though, again, in the western Atlantic off the southeast coast, as we will have a trough, which will come off the east coast and move to the northeast here. And with that, we will have frontal energy, which will more than likely break down. We know how the situation goes. Sometimes we can get a spin up to happen along that. So we will be monitoring to see whether or not that happens. But the Atlantic, on the other hand, more than likely will stay quiet here for at least the next 1 to 2 weeks, while the Pacific will very likely rapidly heat up. And we're probably going to get multiple major strength typhoons here and hurricanes in the coming weeks. Probably at least 1 or 2 Category 5s, especially if we're talking about that Western Pacific signal. And it all comes back to, and it's all related to, El Nino, which is continuing to strengthen here rapidly and already on a record pace right now, which is incredible. And, even if it's already at an incredible strength right now, trust me, it is still only just beginning. And so we will continue to watch it here over the next few weeks and watch and see how it continues to fuel Pacific in the activity. And of course, we will see how it'll affect things in the Atlantic as well as we get closer and closer towards the peak of hurricane season in the Atlantic. With that being said, though, that's going to wrap it up for today's discussion. If you found it informative, I would really appreciate if you like this video. Comment any thoughts or questions you have below. And if you want more videos like this, which they always come on a daily basis, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you can get videos the moment I upload them. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day. Go out and make it a great day, especially if the weather's nice outside, spend some time in the fresh air. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and I'll be back with more tomorrow.